I used to work at Nielsen, leading learning and development there. And as part of that role, as Casper said, one of the things I was responsible for was the rollout of employee-generated learning, probably about 7 years ago now, I think, something like that. And at that time, Nielsen was going through a transition where we needed to, we were having costs cut back and the team scaled back, and we needed to be able to produce more learning than ever before, and we needed to find a way to do more with less. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit more about in today's session. I left Nielsen about 4 years ago and set up a learning and development consultancy called Louise Puddifoot. So as well as partnering with Easy Generator now as an enablement consultant for employee-generated learning, we also deliver other learning and development products and services, things like management development, leadership development, other professional skills development. So really working with lots of different organizations, getting exposure to lots of different learning and development needs from all sorts of directions. So like to think that I keep my learning and development expertise up to date, but I'll let you be the judge of that.
Okay, thank you. And I have 2 questions before we kick off your presentation. The first one, well, it's obvious that you're English. And yeah, I do love your last name. Is there a story connected to the name explaining?
Well, I have to give my husband credit for my name because I married the name rather than was born with it. So yes, it is an English name. It originates from kind of central England, Hertfordshire area. And actually in Old English, it means barrel stomach. And I think it's like a pudding stomach that you can't see your feet. So the actual meaning of the name is actually not particularly flattering. But I do like it. I was quite happy to take it on when I got married.
I think it's a really cool name. I also have another question. So you work with a lot of organizations, larger business, smaller business. Is there also in different countries, is there one specific topic that keeps popping up all the time? Is like one central team right now with learning and development that is sort of top of mind? Or is it really diverse?
I think it's quite diverse. I think what is consistent is that I think the rate of change is forever increasing, and the need for more unique or business specific learning just increases. So that need for employee generated learning is kind of growing all the time as businesses are evolving more and more quickly. And a lot of the businesses we work with are expanding, so increasing what they do and taking on new people quickly. So we definitely see that need evolve. I think from a broader perspective, we see lots of kind of common topics around how people work together and the relationship side of work as well. So how to have good conversations, give each other feedback, work well as a team together, that kind of thing. And growing into kind of resilience and mental health as well, as that becomes kind of important, fundamental in different organizations that we work with.
Okay, thank you. So last thing from my side. So if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat or in the Q&A. So we'll pick them up at the end of Louise's presentation. So Louise, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my screen. Sorry, just a moment. Should be able to see that now. Okay, yeah?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So I want to talk today about doing more with less, because I think we've seen, haven't we, a number of years of transformation since the whole COVID pandemic started, as we've been faced with more and more challenges along the way. And that really continues now as we're faced with increased economic pressure. We see businesses rethinking their strategies, and we see that as a result of that, organizations' learning needs are growing, but their budgets now may sometimes be more limited. So we need to think about how we as learning and development can do more with less and thrive during this difficult time. And we know that sometimes economic pressure, as we're experiencing now, can mean big changes for organizations. It can mean sometimes that budgets are cut. It can sometimes mean that headcount might decrease. And sometimes learning and development can be one of the departments that comes under pressure in times like this. And we know that many of us might already feel the pain that we wish we had more budget, we wish we had more time, we wish we had more people. And when that's pushed even more, it can feel very challenging for us. And we also know that skill development's really important and that it's a big focus for many organizations going forward. So we're kind of asking ourselves that question around how we can do what we need to do, meet those skill development needs with potentially less money or less resource. So before we get into the detail of the presentation today, we'd love to take a poll to get an idea from you in the audience what you're experiencing at the moment, and ask you whether you're experiencing some of these things that I've talked about. Molly, are you able to share the poll?
Yes, but I'm not sure your slides are moving. We're still on the first one.
Yeah, that's
Louise.
okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm just
Thank
launching the poll now.
So we want to ask you, are you experiencing learning and development budget cuts? Are you experiencing the size of your learning and development team reducing? And is the need for training in your organization increasing faster than the amount of learning and development resource available? So let us know by answering those questions. How are we doing, Molly?
Yeah, good. Are you seeing the results as well, Louise?
No, I can't see the results.
Okay, interesting. So I can share them as well. So
Thank you.
yeah, of course. So on the first one, are you experiencing L&D budget cuts? We have 54% of people that said yes, 46% of people said no. The second one is the size of your L&D team reducing. We had 39% of people say yes, 61% said no. And is the need for training increasing faster than the amount of L&D resources available? 91% said yes, and 9% said no. So
Great.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you everyone for sharing that. That's really interesting to see. Yeah, wow. So 91% of us seeing the need for training increasing faster than the amount of resource available. That's huge, isn't it? It's obviously a very common problem. And many of us also experiencing budget cuts and or the size of our teams reducing as well. So it's a very real challenge. And it was a very similar challenge, albeit a different time, that we experienced at Nielsen when we first started looking into the opportunities of working with employee-generated learning. So I want to take you back to a little bit of the backstory in terms of what was happening in the organization when we decided to go down this route. So the background for Nielsen was that we'd grown by acquisition over many years, and the organization was made up of many different business units, sometimes providing training for their own people in their own way. And so we decided to go through a consolidation exercise where we're bringing those disparate teams together to form one centralized global team. And there's obviously benefits to that. You know, you get economies of scale, you're not duplicating effort with multiple teams doing the same thing. You get more consistency in that you have one approach that you can use to go out to the whole organization, and you can potentially get cost savings as well. And what that meant for us actually was that we did reduce the size or reduce the number of learning and development people in the organisation overall when we made that central learning and development team. And that meant that there was really a reduction effectively in learning and development people or resource available. So we needed to think about how we were going to best apply the team that we had. And we really focused that central learning and development team on the key business strategic priorities. So that would be the big priorities that would tend to impact the business at a global level, impact large numbers of people in the business. And that would be where that central team was focused. The gap that left was really the more business unit or department specific training, which was really about the specific tasks that were happening or processes that were happening in each of the different business units, and how would we meet that training need. And that was where we really needed to be able to meet that need in a new and different way. Alongside that, we'd also seen reductions in spend across the organisation. The organisation was making its own cuts. And so that we knew that the budget for vendors for learning and development was also reduced. So we needed to bring in some of those projects that would have previously gone to vendors in-house and find a way to do that too. And it just wasn't physically possible for the central learning and development team to take on all of the training needs in the organisation, where if that were the case, we would have had a long queue for training that we could never have realised. And even things like updates to existing courses and stuff, we'd start to form a bottleneck because we would have a queuing system in place where people couldn't get updates quickly. And then that makes it really hard to keep information fresh and keep information current. So we decided to look at employee-generated learning as a way to enable us to be able to meet those needs, to get that departmental, that employee-specific, business unit-specific learning in place, working with our experts in the business, and so that we could do that in a really good and really effective and efficient way. So what we found was that there are a number of benefits of going down that route once we looked into it. So I want to talk you through these 4 benefits that we experience today. So it firstly enabled us to really capture the expertise of our internal experts. We were really able to make sure that we could get that expertise and capture it and document it and have it available to share with lots of other people in the organisation. It also meant quality for us in terms of having the experts involved, so very accurate training, and them being able to keep it up to date effectively and quickly. It meant that we could limit that skill gap. So whether that's new people coming into the organisation or new processes and tools in place, we could upskill people quickly in the organisation. And then finally, we could reduce our dependency on external suppliers and external vendors as we built this expertise of doing things in-house. So I'm going to go into all 4 of those benefits in a little bit more detail for you now. So if we start with capturing expertise and enabling our employees to produce effective learning, when we empower all of our people to produce learning, that enables us to increase our output in terms of learning without increasing our costs, because we can capture that internal expertise and experience. By capturing that, we also have longer term benefits because we ensure that critical business knowledge and experience is shared and retained even when people leave. So, you know, we've heard a lot about the Great Resignation recently. Still have, you know, churn in organizations. When we have people leave, we want to make sure we have that knowledge captured on an ongoing basis so we're not left with a gap when people leave. And we have to bear in mind that our subject matter experts that we're working with are exactly that. They're experts in their subject matter. They're content experts. They're not learning designers. So we won't expect them to build training in the same way as we would an instructional designer or a learning designer. And we're really asking them to share their expertise. So we need the right tools and right support in place for them to be able to turn their expertise into effective learning in a really user-friendly and simple way. And so in the research we did of different tools available, we found that Easy Generator was a really simple to use tool that enabled our subject matter experts to turn their expertise into learning easily and in a straightforward way. We also found a benefit of quality and accuracy. And so quality is an interesting one. We often also hear the pushback of, but the quality won't be good enough because these people aren't learning designers or instructional designers. So it kind of depends what we mean by quality. So when we're asking our subject matter experts to design learning, we're not having the same expectations in terms of design expertise or quality that we might from instructional designers. What we're asking them for is a way of sharing their knowledge in a really clear way. And what that means we do get in terms of quality is courses created that are really relevant to the business and the business needs because it comes from the people in the business themselves. It's also high quality and high accuracy because it's constantly updated by those subject matter experts themselves. They don't need to come to the learning and development team and wait in a queue for somebody to work with to make updates. They can do it simply and easily in a matter of hours or minutes. They don't need to go to external vendors or anything like that. Another great benefit is the fact that you can collaborate on courses together. So it means that you can have multiple experts working together on a course, and that then brings more expertise together into one place. Again, because we're asking people to do this and we're asking people to come together, we needed to think about what are the processes and technologies that we use to do this. So again, obviously we're using Easy Generator as our tool. We also thought about the bigger processes in place around, how does someone get a license? Where do they go to find out information? Then they use the tool when they've built the e-learning. How do they publish it? All that kind of thing as well. We wanted to make sure that whole end-to-end process of somebody building an e-learning was really as simple and as user-friendly as possible, which certainly in our case, it hadn't previously been. So we really simplified that part of the process as well. The third benefit that I mentioned was around filling the skill gaps. So we know we've seen a lot of churn recently. We know we've got people leaving businesses in some cases at historic rates, and we don't want to have that critical business knowledge being lost when people leave. And we expect that to continue, particularly if you're having headcount costs in your organization, you can expect that to continue even more. So we want to make sure we're always capturing people's knowledge. As things change as well, we tend to see people move roles. We tend to see new processes come into place, new ways of doing things. So we want to make sure we can meet those learning needs created by that change, whether it's being able to skill somebody up who's picking up a role that somebody's moved on from, or whether it's just something new that's been launched into the organization and we need to get people up to speed with it quickly. And so we find at times of change or times of gaps that the learning need increases and that the need for more learning output increases as we have those growing training needs. So we need to be ready to meet those needs, and we need to have the right tools and processes in place to be able to do that. And then the final benefit that I want to mention today was our reduction on dependency on external suppliers or external vendors. So we would have had, reasonable sized budget going to external vendors, and when budgets were cut, they were one of the things that we really needed to think about. And bringing more learning production in-house definitely considerably reduces the need for that budget. It means that less money is spent with more expensive external agencies or even freelancers and contractors, and that we can do things ourselves. And although some of that external work can be high quality from a design perspective, it can also be a long and an expensive process to create and maintain courses that are delivered externally. Whereas when you do things in-house, it can be much quicker to be able to get things up and running, quicker to deploy them. So that can be really useful when you want to get people up to speed quickly. And then, of course, it really gives you the opportunity to be really well aligned with those specific business needs that you have in the organization and work at speed and at scale to produce impactful learning experiences. So to summarize, we saw lots of benefits of going down the employee-generated learning route. We definitely found we could increase the volume of learning we were producing, whilst doing so with high quality and high speed and less overall spend to do so. So it was really a great win for us in the organization. And even though I left Nielsen some time ago, some years ago myself, they've continued to work with Easy Generator throughout those years as a key tool for how they enable employee-generated learning in the organization. So any questions you have around the benefits that we saw or how we did that, I'll be happy to discuss.
Yes, so feel free to add any questions to the Q&A that is in the tool. So we have a question there from Rebecca. So how do you counter the argument we often hear of, while this may reduce reliance on external suppliers, won't this be wasting critical internal time or be a barrier to output for internal staff?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Rebecca. I think it depends how well that process works with external suppliers and what you're using the training for. But certainly in our experience, working with external suppliers was quite time consuming in itself. So even though they were doing the heavy lifting in terms of the course design, there was typically quite a heavy amount of time needed from a subject matter expert perspective to provide them with information to use to build the course, to provide feedback to build the course, particularly if it's something that's specific to your business or your department. So that designer or external agency won't have any expertise in the topic. So that means that you save that back and forth time of working with a vendor and just build it yourself. The other saving we found is that we often had people that were kind of go-to people for training who would end up repeating the same thing many times for many different people. So, you know, if you're the expert in a certain process, you might end up training every new person who comes into the team on that process, dealing with every question people have about that process. Once you've put your expertise into an e-learning, you then can use that e-learning to do a large proportion of that in-person stuff that you would have been doing before. So it is a bit of a kind of short-term pain now to invest your time in creating the e-learning, but long-term gain later when you save back all that time of that continuous kind of one-to-one conversation that you'd have.
Yeah. Pay now, save later. Yeah, that's clear. Indeed. Okay, a question from Frederick, I think. How do you motivate employees to share knowledge? How to overcome the fear of the spotlight?
Yeah, that's interesting. In terms of overcoming the fear of the spotlight, one of the learnings we had actually was when we first started out, we decided to be quite hands-off as a central L&D team. So, you know, this is employee-generated learning. We'll give them all the tools. We're not going to hold their hand. We're not going to be heavily involved. And actually, we had to rethink that and change that approach, particularly for people publishing their first learning, And we found that some of it was just a kind of confidence thing, that is, particularly if you've not done that before, it's quite daunting, isn't it, to publish your first learning if you feel like no one else has looked at it. So we did find sometimes with new people, we would actually kind of give them that reassurance. Yep, this is good. Yep, let's press go, to help them overcome that fear of the spotlight. We did a lot of
out slowly, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did a lot of that ourselves initially, back in, many years ago, but actually Easy Generator help a lot with that as well. And they have people available to kind of look at things as well. So that can be really useful.
Yeah, and the counterweight of it is, of course, that if you do it, you are recognized as an expert on a certain field. So that sort of balances it out a bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think that answers Frederico's how do you motivate people a bit, because by sharing your knowledge, you do get that recognition as an expert. So that's one way that you can motivate people. Some people are also quite intrinsically motivated to want to help people learn and enjoy it. So that's also helpful.
Okay. So I see questions popping in the chat and in the Q&A. So preferably use the Q&A. That's easiest for me to follow. I will work both if possible. So we have a question from Joyce. What were the greatest challenges and resistance to change from management and employees with the rollout of ETL? So biggest resistance from both management and employees were ETL.
Yeah. I think the one that's been kind of mentioned in the questions actually of, these people are busy, they don't have time for this, we can't be giving them something else to do, was a fairly commonplace pushback from management. Some management, not all, but different people understood things differently. So we would need to be prepared to explain the benefits of them doing it and kind of what the benefits would be for that person potentially to save time, as I've just mentioned, or for the team overall to have this in place. How is that going to benefit the team? How is the time commitment that they're going to give going to be worth it? And from people themselves, again, probably time is the biggest factor. And it's true, isn't it? I mean, everyone is really busy. We know everyone's really busy. No one's suggesting that people are sat with a couple of hours spare every day that they can build some e-learnings. So it's really about thinking about what are the benefits, when you invest this time, what do you get back? Why are you doing this? Why is this worth it? And how to make that work.
Okay, so that's directly related to the question from Marianne. How do you sell the benefits to subject specialists to take the time and create content for others? They already know what they're doing, so what's in it for them?
Yeah.
Any addition on that?
Mostly what's in it for them is not to be asked questions or to have their profile be raised, as we've spoken about. Some people are more intrinsically motivated than others. So we definitely took the approach that we would start working with the people that wanted to do it. So the keen people, the early adopters, whatever you want to call them, we embraced them and we worked with them first before we tried to challenge those people that were really resistant. So I think, think about that. You don't necessarily have to get every challenging person on board from day one. You can start with people that are much more open-minded to it or keen on it, show examples of success. And then when you start to see those examples of success, other people will come on board as well.
Yeah. It was also a topic that came up in the previous presentation of Geert on the hospital. And so it had also to do with letting go as a learning department. The moment that you're pushing things, then you need to convince people that they have to do it and have to do it to make time and on the right quality. If it's a need that comes from them, then that goes away. And for example, he was explaining that doctors had an interest in raising the quality of the care. And from that perspective, they were taking initiatives. And then you do not have to explain any benefits, whatever. It is, they are solving their own problem, basically. So that's a really different perspective, I think.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Okay, did you use incentives to encourage engagement contribution?
Not really, certainly not financial. I guess we would make our learners part of a community. They would get to talk to each other about how things were going. They'd probably increase their network. They would have their profile raised. So they didn't have direct incentives, but there were things that people liked about being an Easy Generator author. There were benefits that they experienced from that they enjoyed. And we tried to make it, a pleasant and well-supported experience. And we thought a lot about how do we reward and recognize people, just in terms of publishing case studies about things that they'd done, sharing successes in meetings, thanking them, simple things like that.
Okay, yeah, clear. Yeah. So I actually know of a customer. It's a life insurance company, and they actually, if you create content, you can actually score points there. And they sort of, and by the way, the points only count if actually people use your content. So just publishing isn't enough. And then those points are taken into account in your yearly evaluation. So it's sort of that way it has an input on your salary. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds good.
And another example maybe is a sort of managing by example. So I think that also having, so if you as a manager want to sort of have your people share knowledge, then taking the task of yourself to do that as an example is really beneficial. Show them that it works and that you do it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think maybe we just lost Casper for a second. So
okay.
I can pick up the Q&A just till we get Casper back. So yeah, I'm just going through which ones we have not answered yet. We have one from Matt that asks, what specific KPI/metrics do you look at to determine a successful course or training content?
So the first thing I'd look at, it's not really a KPI, is just, does it give people the knowledge they need to do their jobs? So we would look at things as, what do people need to do their jobs? What do they need to know? Does this course give them what they need to do their jobs? Does it give them what they need to know from a more informal perspective? From a formal perspective, we did gather data. So we did gather reach figures on how many e-learnings have been created, how many people taken them. We had surveys built into our LMS so we could get some feedback on whether people like them. For some projects, we would do more to look at the actual business impact of a specific project if it had a really clear goal. So we'd measure that as well. So we did have those kind of KPIs, but I think fundamentally, if you're just looking at one e-learning at a time, it's, does it give people what they need to do their jobs is the question.
Yeah, definitely. Welcome back, Casper.
Hi, Casper. We missed you.
Something happened with my internet connection. Not sure what happened, but I dropped suddenly. So I got the last part of your answer. By the way, we also have a feature in Easy Generator to sort of evaluate the quality of the content, how people like it. So it is called the NPS score. Basically, at the end of a course, you can ask a question to the learner: would you recommend this course to somebody else? And based on that, the course gets a score. And you actually can see as an author how well you are doing. Also, we have what we call data insight in Easy Generator. So for a subject expert, it's not that interesting to see that Louise scored an 8 for my course or not. But it is really interesting to see how many people took my course, how long did they in general take about it, did they finish it, did the questions work out or not. So we are using the data that we gather to sort of inform them on that, and that is also really satisfying for them. Okay, I'm looking at the Q&A section, and maybe one of you can help me out. Maybe it's empty. Yeah. My internet went down, but I think we answered all the questions.
Yeah, so there are a few more in the chat as well that have just come up. So yeah, one of them, another one from Federico is, can employee-generated learning go hand in hand with task delegation? This was, I mean, as a team manager, putting your team to employee-generated learning, are there any experiences that you know of?
Okay, so one way I know it works well is if you are the manager of a team and there are some processes, let's say, in your team that are not documented, and maybe you're having to repeatedly train people on them or somebody else is, one thing you can do is delegate the task of creating a learning on that to somebody that you're training in that process. So when you're training them, part of their learning experience is going to be taking what you're teaching them and putting it into Easy Generator so that then that can be shared with other teammates in the future. And there's great benefits to that. It takes that workload off your plate. it means you get something created that can then be shared for everyone else. It's formalized, it's documented, it's a better process. And it also for their own development is really beneficial, because a great way for them to remember what they've learned from that task is to then have to document it and repeat it to somebody else.
Okay.
Nice. I think we got another one in the Q&A as well, Casper.
Yeah, I see. Could you share the 3 key tasks that the SME will need to manage?
So I think when an SME is creating training, I see it as kind of 2 things they need to think about. One of them is what content do I want to share and how do I want to share that? And then the other bit is, how do you put that in the tool? So actually the first bit's harder, like turning your content, putting your content into the Easy Generator tool. It's very easy to use. Actually, that's kind of the easy bit, although there'll be a little bit of a learning curve when they first use it. It's not difficult. Kind of in the same way, I guess, as structuring a PowerPoint presentation. Using PowerPoint itself isn't that difficult, or Google Slides or whatever isn't that difficult. But actually thinking about, okay, what's the message? How do I want to structure this? What's the breakdown of content is the bit that probably needs the thought. So I think as a SME, the kind of steps are, understanding what do people need to learn, then thinking about, okay, how am I going to structure that content to make it understandable in a simple way for people? And then the third bit is put it in the tool and build it.
Okay, clear. Then we have 2 other questions. So what was or were the biggest challenges when getting SMEs to create their own content?
I think we've answered that a little bit around, time and how to go about it. I think one of the other things we found helpful with those challenges was sharing best practices. So I guess the challenge is they don't know where to start, or they don't know what good looks like. So what we want to do is show them what a good employee generated learning looks like. And particularly if it's something that's already been done in your organization, then it feels really relevant to them. It's not just, Easy Generator have some great examples you can share, but I think it takes it to another level when you have something created in your organization. So when they see that their peer over there has created this and it's really nice and it looks like this, they get the kind of idea of, oh, okay, I'm going to create one like that. So we would find that people would essentially copy each other, but I mean that in a good way, that they take inspiration from something that was already done and then think, I'm going to build something like that. So we found that helpful to kind of mitigate that challenge.
Yeah. And I also remember from the early days with Nielsen that we were working. I think you had a guy in Australia was really active, and he found out that they had like a peer in Sweden that he completely didn't know, but that was sort of working on the same thing as he was. And they found it out because they were creating the same courses. So that way it was also sort of being able to connect them together, and they sort of teamed up. I remember that, and we see that happening more often indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's so true. David in Australia.
Yeah.
And we did. So when people would, when somebody was about to create an e-learning, one of the things that we would guide them to do would be to search the existing system to see if something already existed or was in creation. So that would mean that they would have that get that visibility as to somebody else who might be doing something similar to them.
Correct. The last question also is something that maybe was already touched on. There's another question popping up. So after that, but if training were first created bottom up, how did you, if any way, recognize, award those who took the effort, or was it seen as something they should have done in the first place? So we talked a bit about doing that. So maybe I can share something that we do, a best practice in Easy Generator that I think is one of the coolest things that we do in our company. So we use Slack, which is something similar like Teams, and in Slack you can create a channel on a certain topic. And we have what we call a recognition channel. So there you can give praise to somebody if somebody does something really good. So it is connected to our values. We have 4 values. And for each value, we created a whole bunch of cards. What you actually can do, you can drag in a card into the channel. And for example, I could, after this webinar, we have one of our values is, for example, we deliver. And I could actually then tag Molly in that post. And, well, Molly, for the first time we did an event, you organized it really great, and let other people know that we did that. Show how we sort of do that value, but at the same time giving her praise and recognition. So those kind of things can be really cool to do. And I think it's one of the coolest things we do at Easy Generator in recognizing people in their effort. So it doesn't have to be money, just being awarded with that somebody actually noticed that what you did and gives you praise is already a great thing. Do you have anything to add to that from a rewarding perspective for people who create content?
It sounds great what you just described, and I would just agree. We'd always want to recognize and reward as much as possible. So we'd never take the attitude they should have been doing it anyway. We'd always want to thank people at the very least, and where we see great examples, celebrate them, raise awareness of what they've done.
Yeah, great. So don't do the last thing. So don't take them for granted. They should have done it anyway. Even if that is the case, if they do a great job, still give them praise. Indeed, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, then we have a question from Heidi. By the way, Heidi Nielsen. That is. How would a learner use EG as a knowledge base? Not sure how to find a topic in the middle of a course or how to. It was mentioned in the first session to use it like we use Google. So learner can word search all course or have to look at agenda for each course. So that's maybe directed to me a bit more because I did the first question. So yeah, very good question. So if you have, so Easy Generator is really to capture the knowledge. And we're more looking at learning management systems and learning experience platform to make it available. And what we see happening now is that more and more tools, and some of the are the really big tools like Cornerstone, but also the last speaker of the day will be Nielsen from How Now, which is an LXP. And they integrate with your existing tools. So you actually, they have an integration with Slack, they have an integration with Teams, they even have an integration with Google. So, and it's so cool because if you just type in a search in your browser in Google, so how do I do this or how do I do that, then there is a small bar on the right of your screen that actually will show the results, not from Google, but the results from the LXP, from the database, and that is content created by your peers. So that way you make it available. So it is not Easy Generator that sort of makes it available. We sort of do the capturing, the altering part. And we sort of look at other tools like LMSs, LXPs, knowledge management system, performance support tools to sort of pull that information in and make it available at the moment of need. Do you have anything to add to that, Louise?
No, I don't actually. Back in those days, we didn't have that functionality, but I know that now that organization does have an LXP and does operate in a similar way that you described.
Yeah. And what we see happening is with learning content. So we from a learning department come up with, okay, we put this content in the learning management system and that content in LXP, and this content will be in SharePoint and that content will be in our knowledge base. And the learner is ignorant of that. And so what you need to have is like one search channel that search all those sources. So the learner can just go in one place and search and all that information will pop up. And what we see happening with Easy Generator content, it sort of populates all four of those knowledge bases. And then the key thing is you need to have facility to find it back. Yeah. Okay, I see another question from, let's see, here it is. I need to leave the training. I need to read before I start reading it out loud. So I think that was the last question.